What's up, guys? What's up, guys? Wes, the People's Pitmaster. You're watching the behind the scenes. We're shooting this week with the co-founder of Meatstock, Jay Beaumont. Jay, can you hear me good?
I can.
Fantastic. And what part of Australia are you?
I live in a little town called Port Macquarie, which is between Sydney and Brisbane. It's on the water. It's a pretty location. There's only about 70,000 people here, but yeah, it's a pretty part of Australia. Nice beaches. It's a good spot.
Awesome. Good deal. Good deal. So, everybody on Facebook and YouTube, you get to watch the behind the scenes. If you've got any questions, you want to chime in, feel free. And as we have time, we'll bring those in. And otherwise, we're going to get this show on the road.
Let's do it.
Ready? All right. What's up, guys? Wes, the People's Pitmaster, back again for another episode of the Smoke Ring Syndicate. It's my weekly barbecue podcast that drops every Wednesday at 5:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Last week, we headed to Florida and we talked to the Trompo King. This week, we're headed abroad, headed to Australia. We've got Jay Beaumont, co-founder of Meatstock, in the house. Can you
G'day,
hear me?
everybody. Yep. How we doing?
Good, good, good. So Jay Beaumont, co-founder of Meatstock, and you're up to 4 or 5 different Meatstock locations now.
Yeah, we started off with one in Sydney, and then we moved to Auckland, which is in New Zealand, and we also did Melbourne. But now we have one back in New Zealand, which we haven't been back there since COVID. We have 3 in Australia, and we also have one in Brazil. It was run by a good friend of mine, Daniel Lee. But yeah, so we've got 5 this year.
Oh man, fantastic! So let's start at the beginning, if you will. Jay, what got you into barbecue to begin with? Well before the Meatstock, well before the fame and you and your partner of the Meatstock, which brilliant, genius name, by the way. I'm kind of surprised that it had never been had never been uttered before. But walk me through what got you interested in barbecue. What got you interested in barbecue in was it, did you start out growing up around barbecue, or did you turn 30 and it was, World War II history or local history versus barbecue, or what got you interested in barbecue? Was it as a child thing, or where'd you start?
Yep. So I love to travel. I've always loved to travel, and we went to America. This is maybe 15 years ago. We went to the States for the first time. Had never been there before, and I was about 30 years old, I want to say. And America was never really on my bucket list of places that I wanted to go. There's places in Europe and whatnot that I wanted to go to. But we ended up in America at a friend's place, and they lived in Denver. And
Okay.
they wanted to put a party on for us because we were Aussie friends of theirs. We met them on a boat cruise through Europe, and they catered the party with American low and slow barbecue, catered out of Denver. And I sat there as a 30-year-old thinking to myself, why have I never tried this before? Why have I never tried American low and slow barbecue? So in Australia, we have a barbecue culture, but it's all based around grilling, and it's all based around gas grilling. So the culture of Australian barbecue was completely foreign to me when I went to America, that there's smokers and low and slow things, and even cooking on charcoal. So when I got home, I couldn't forget about it. I couldn't forget what the brisket tasted like, what the pulled pork tasted like. And I started to fish around in Australia for who was sort of into the scene and who was cooking like that. And there wasn't much doing here at all. You couldn't go to a butcher shop or anywhere and buy a brisket. They would get the brisket, thin it out, and roll it up in like a roast here in Australia.
Yeah.
So, but it was one of those things. A lot of people at the same time, around that time, 15 years ago, the Australian dollar was really high. It was like 95 cents. It was nearly parity. And so a lot of people were traveling to the States for the first time and sort of discovering low and slow barbecue, and then coming back to Australia and thinking to themselves, how do I do it back here? How can I recreate that back here? And that's that's how my passion for barbecue got started. But yeah, I was 30 years old, never tried it before, wasn't a childhood thing or anything like that. So yeah.
Yeah. I was kind of curious because it's to me, it's like it's just supernatural, and it's just part of growing up, and it's around all of us. So I can't. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. Oh yeah, for us, barbecuing is grilling steak or grilling, whatever sausages or whatever you may do. It's uh, I can't imagine turning 30 years old and going, oh, brisket.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
don't get me wrong. I cooked my fair share of steaks and sausages and rissoles and chops, and lamb's a big deal in Australia. I cooked all that 2-3 times a week, and
yeah.
but it was all on a 4-burner gas grill, and it was
Hmm.
all what I'd say to be like quintessentially Australian rissoles and chops and
Hmm.
T-bone steaks, and you've got all those things as well. But that's what we thought barbecue was. That's what most of
Yeah.
Australians thought barbecue was.
Oh yeah.
We didn't really have much of an idea that there was a low and slow way of cooking meat. But primarily too, I think it's because we didn't really have the meat comes from 3 main places in the world, like the 3 biggest: Brazil, Australia, and America. And I think your
Hmm.
genetics were a lot ahead of us. And so getting
Yeah.
those big briskets that were really well marbled was something that we just didn't have a lot of. And when we did, we exported it because there was just no demand for it here. No one knew what a brisket was. So
Oh yeah.
the only so I think once our genetics kind of caught up, and along with Brazil and Australia, I suppose we've got some of the best beef in the world now, together with America. Once our genetics caught up and the big abattoirs or the big processing facilities started to see that there was a demand here, now a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff is cut to spec and obviously used locally as well.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and most of a lot of the competition guys are using Australian Wagyu, and that's that's a testament how fast Australia is moving towards trying to be the kings of barbecue, and the best at the best on the block, I guess you could say, with regard to good quality meat, which is you know it's kind of the opposite of how barbecue actually started, back way back when. But now it's the higher quality brisket you can get, the most expensive you can get, the best quality. Go for it. You got to get it, and a lot of it comes from your backyard.
Yeah, our genetics have got really good in our beef of cattle, and some of the quality of what we're producing here in Australia is as good as you find anywhere else, if not better.
Yeah, I would argue better. I mean, we've got great beef here too, but um, there's something to be said about the Australian Wagyu, for sure. So, 30 years old, what were you doing as a full time job at 30? And have you, I guess, should I say, have you transitioned to full time barbecue nowadays, or do you still host? You still have a 9 to 5?
Still have a 9 to 5. I started off as a publisher. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and
Okay.
so I'm still a graphic designer, still in publishing, still have magazines in my local town. But barbecue has become a bit of a passion on the side,
Hmm.
and it's kind of got out of hand a little bit. So this year there'll be 70,000+ people will walk through this. That's just Australia and New Zealand before we even get to Brazil, right? So it feeding that many people, organizing events that big, keeping everyone relatively happy and entertained is a big effort. We've got a big team. We've got a lot of people who volunteer and they show up to every event that we do. But yeah, I still
Hmm.
have a day job, and this is a bit of a passion on the side.
Yeah. Okay. So you started. How long? How long? I guess we're what, 7, 8 years in on Meatstock now. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. I think we're about 8 years in, but I think 2016 might have been the first meat stock. But previous to that, in my hometown, I did another event called the Blues and Barbecue Festival, which was a barbecue competition held on the river near where I lived. And I think we started that in 2014. And then in 2000, might have been 2013 actually. So I've been in and around barbecue for, pretty much since I came back from America. And back then it was like there was no Facebook chats or groups, it was forums, So I used to sit on forums and try and, educate yourself about a smoker and who's selling it and who's building it and what they should cost and where to get wood from and all this sort of stuff. So, I been in it for about 15 years, but Meatstock's been around for about 8 or 9 years.
Yeah. And 15 years to go from not knowing anything in barbecue to hosting 70,000 people at a barbecue. Like, at what point does your hair catch on fire, or have you just given up on having hair? I mean, with 70,000 people, that's got to take up. There's perfect heads in the world, and the rest they covered them with hair.
Yeah, look, it is stressful. You've got to have a good team of people around you. My business partner's very good, but yeah, I've just got to. What's happened is that a lot of people have come together that share a passion, and Meatstock is a combination of all these people together. So it's not like other events where there's this one person going, look at me, this is my event. Meatstock's a group of, when you see our photo at the end of the, group of pitmasters and people that are working on the show, it's 100 people deep. And what we do at Meatstock is a representation of those people. So, it's not something I do by myself. I've got a lot of people helping me, and a lot of people are passionate, and they rock up. And what can I do to help? And we've kind of turned it into I wouldn't say a well-oiled machine, because events have nothing but challenges. If once you solve one, the next challenge pops up. But we do have people that rock up to every single event without fail, and they know what to do. They know their job, and we didn't start off that big either. We started off with crowds of 7,000 people, and then we went to 11, and then we always don't break it. Don't break it. Don't keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Work on just sort of like incrementally, getting better and better. Because I don't know about in the States, but in Australia, a lot of barbecue events have come and gone. Everyone kind of, it's the it thing to do is to start a barbecue festival, but making them viable and making them stand the test of time is something that's really hard to do. It does keep me up at night, or gets me up early in the morning is what I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started a barbecue festival, and it's essentially stages with bands. You have different folks cooking different things. Is it more of, because I've not gotten the opportunity to come out. Is it you sign up to come and cook at Meatstock, or what's the guts of, when you said, when you guys started, tooling around with going to Meatstock, what was the goal? Was it to, have a trophy and have some, structured rules, or was it just kind of a free for all? Or walk me through that.
Okay. At the heart of Meatstock is a barbecue competition. That's at the very heart of it. Really, really early on in my interest in barbecue, we tried to get sort of KCBS to sanction our events. And that proved to be pretty difficult. So we ended up starting our own sanctioning body, which is called the Australian Barbecue Alliance. There's also the New Zealand Barbecue Alliance. And that sanctioning body was set up to sanction a barbecue competition along the traditional lines of, brisket, pork ribs, hand-ins. We also do lamb in Australia because that's pretty big for us. So some of the lamb turn-ins are really good. Lamb's great, low and slow. So at the heart of it is a barbecue competition. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a barbecue competition. Obviously you have. But if you don't know people, it's pretty shitty. It's a pretty shitty experience. You walk around, people ignore you. Maybe a few people say hello to you. people are hidden away in their trailers or their marquees or whatever, and you don't get to eat any of the food because that all goes to the judges. And all in all, a barbecue competition like that is not a very good experience for a punter, you know. So what we tried to do is like, how do you make it exciting? Well, you start adding things like master classes. You could do pit tours, but then there's music, right? So you start putting bands on a stage. We do a butchery competition. We were doing sort of like meet and greets with the pit masters where people could get to know them. We obviously had a lot of food vendors there so that people could try the food from food vendors that were doing good quality barbecue, because the barbecue teams aren't really set up to cater, and nor would you want to probably eat a lot of competition barbecue food either. So we've got a lot of caterers that come along. They serve the masses. They do really good quality barbecue from all different types of styles, low and slow, Brazilian. And then on top of that, it's grown even further. So now we've got things like a strongman competition. There's arm wrestling. There's a car show. There's a whole long list of like, there's axe throwing. There's like arcade games. There's a barbecue expo. There's people can come and get barbecue related tattoos. So there's just all these layers that make Meatstock like kind of like a fair, a big country kind of like, I don't know, like in Australia we call them the Easter show, which is basically the big agriculture show that happens in the city, and I suppose the States has a lot of them as well. But that's kind of what we tried to make it. We tried to make it into something where you're going to spend your hard-earned money to come through the door, and to be honest, you're spending, you know, $60 plus to walk, 60 Australian dollars to walk through the gate. We need to entertain you. We need to make sure you get value for money. So we put on a really good lineup of bands and music and entertainment and stuff for people to see and do. So it's not, even though the barbecue competition is the whole reason why we exist and the heart of what we do, to be honest, that's not really exciting for the punter or the general public. So all these other things that we do is kind of to make it exciting for other people to come and experience barbecue. And I've lost count of the amount of people in New Zealand and Australia that said, I got into barbecue just because I went to a Meatstock and I went, wow, this is so cool. Tried the food, talked to some teams, and now I've got 4 smokers and a cupboard full of rubs and sauces.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a lot of the barbecue culture has kind of been built in the last 15 years there. And I mean, you're you and your partner are a big part of that, there locally. And then you guys are kind of bleeding into other places as well, which, I mean, I'm sure Brazil had plenty of barbecue on their plate, but maybe not quite traditional, I guess, American style competition barbecue, maybe. So when you started it locally, you just did one. How do you go from one little barbecue contest to the amount of barbecue contests you're putting on, and with the caveat of still holding a full-time job?
Every time we do an event, it seems to sell out. People seem to come along. They seem to enjoy what we do. And then every year we make it just that little bit bigger. So we've just grown slowly is what I would say. We started off from this little event that was manageable, and then we've grown and grown and grown, but the team's grown as well. So, and it's not like we do it week in, week out. If we did it week in, week out, it would be my job. But the reality is, in 3 months' time, Meatstock will all be over, and I'll have nothing to do for a few months. So, look, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of people involved, but we've just added to the team. There's production managers. There's people that look after camping areas, people that look after barbecue team areas. So there's plenty of people that are just part of the team. And to be honest, they just love being there. It's fun to be on the other side of it. So it's cool to compete, and yes, it's cool to go to these events, but to work them is fun too. Just to watch it start from nothing, gets all built up in 3 days, and then everyone streams in, has fun, and then leaves. That's a cool experience as well. It's a bit of an adrenaline rush.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys have brought in some pretty big pit masters, American pit masters. I think Harry Sue's been down, Mo Cason. I mean, I'm sure you guys have had more than just those two, just off the top of my head. Um, was the idea to bring these folks in as participants, or was it more of a let's, this will help us get more publicity and, I guess cement us as more of a real barbecue event?
I think a, a lot of what happened, maybe I want to say 10 years ago, was barbecue pitmasters was becoming quite popular, and you had
Hmm.
you had people like Mo Case and you had people like Tuffy Stone on those shows. And so we decided, when we decided to bring these people out, we did a lot of master classes because
Hmm.
people knew about barbecue but had no idea how to cook it. So what we did was Tuffy did two master classes back to back for 100 people when he came out. And I think what happened
Yeah.
was a lot of people who are really getting into barbecue would see someone like Tuffy Stone, who's a world champion, and they really wanted to master this craft of barbecue and competing in barbecue. So we just brought them out basically to try and elevate our level of cooking barbecue.
Yeah.
Um,
So if,
and as a good example, I suppose Jared, who lives in New Zealand, who's friends with Tuffy Stone to this day, and learnt from Tuffy at his masterclasses, won brisket at the Jack last time around.
mhm,
So first international team to win brisket. So
yeah.
I think what we brought those people out really to try and elevate what we were doing here, and teach people what to look for. But it was also fun having them at the events, because if Mo walks around or Tuffy walks around, and it's the same in the States as well, right? People stop them, they
Yeah.
want photos, they want to do that sort of stuff. So yeah, the only problem is it's got bloody expensive to fly people out these days, because pre-COVID the travel was cheap, but it ain't cheap anymore.
No, it's not the cheapest way to travel anymore, unfortunately. Um, and you guys are bringing you have you guys calculated how many countries you guys have brought into Australia to do the event? You have any idea?
I haven't, but look, we've had people visit from everywhere from New Caledonia to all through Europe. We've had lots of pitmasters from the States come along, some
Hmm.
people to compete, some people to look. A lot of KCBS's top teams have at some point been over. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I think the problem is it's 14-hour flight. It's like, and
Yeah.
it ain't cheap. So I don't know when the last time you spent 14 hours in an economy seat at the back end of the aeroplane, but that ain't fun.
No, no, not quite. Um, so you got the five events. Are you personally attending all five of these events, or is
Yeah,
it
yeah.
you're able to set the team up and send them away?
No, I'll be at all five, including Brazil, which I'm just sort of there as a spectator. Um,
Hmm.
and Brazil's an interesting place too, because, like I said earlier, access to good quality beef and lots of it, and they've fallen
Yeah.
in love around about the same time Australia did with this sort of low and slow barbecue movement, and they're
Hmm.
into it. They had a cooking over charcoal, cooking over fire culture
Yeah.
already. So picanhas and that sort of thing that they cook, but they're really starting to get into low and slow now as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'll be over as a spectator for that event in Brazil, and usually what we do is I put an open invite out to all of my friends, family, acquaintances, people who don't even know me, and me and a guy called Adriano, we lead a trip over there, and we all go as a group, and we
Hmm.
just explore Brazil. It's a pretty cool, unique place. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if America is anymore, but Brazil is like the wild, wild west.
Yeah. So we've gotten five events. Is it just you're waiting for the next person to say, "Hey, I want to try to do a meat stock on the level of what you're doing," or are there are there places in the world that you see meat stock going?
Look, it's always been on a bucket list to do one in the States, right? Because I think we
Hmm.
offer something very different and unique. Um,
Hmm.
but it's kind of like finding the right location and the right partner as well. So we are talking to people. I mean, I'd love to do
Yeah.
one in Vegas. Vegas one day. I'd love to do one there because I love Vegas. But there's lots of other spots in the States where something like Meatstock would work well. We've talked to lots of people. We've talked to people in Europe. We've talked to people in Saudi Arabia. I suppose the only issue is putting an event on like Meatstock is no small feat. It's a big investment. So yeah, and it's about finding someone who has experience in doing events, because you can look like a real idiot real quick if you don't have the right people that have experience trying to put events on. Because a lot of people they'll go book a celebrity pitmaster, they'll go book a venue, and then they kind of think it'll all just happen, and it doesn't really work like that. So yeah, it's a tough environment, and you've got to find the right partners. But yeah, look, I'd love to see something in Germany. I'd love to see something in the Middle East. I'd love to see something in the States one day. But to be honest, we had a lot of those big grand plans before COVID hit. And then, to be honest, after COVID hit, being a festival and having no income for 2 years and doing our arse before COVID, because we had an entire festival in Melbourne set up, done, spent, bands booked, everyone's paid for, ready to go, open the gates, and that was the weekend that Australia shut down. So, to battle back from that, get money back in the bank, and at the moment we're just like, let's just concentrate on what we do here, and we'll take the right opportunities as they come up.
Yeah. Well, and it's I love the idea of Brazil, because I think they're probably very similar, because they've got kind of a similar history of how long they've been in barbecue, into the low and slow. So it's kind of only makes sense a little bit there. But I almost see like a Meatstock as you gotta go to Australia to have the Meatstock experience. That's where my head is. I think I would probably end up in Brazil before I end up in Australia, just because I 14 hours on a plane doesn't sound lovely, and I hear everything animal wise is trying to kill you in Australia. So maybe not.
Nothing. Yeah, look, I think that whole animal killing you thing is pretty beat out of place. There's, yeah, I don't know how that become really popular in the States, but yes, we've got deadly animals, but
yeah,
I don't hear of anyone ever dying of anything.
Well, we don't have what is it, the huntsman spider that everybody's this, oh my gosh, it's a huntsman spider. And if I was to go to Australia, my wife's coming with, and there's no way she would, if she saw one, she's gonna burn that building to the ground. And
I don't even think huntsmen are big and ugly, but they're not really that deadly. I don't think. I think there's probably deadlier spiders in America than there is a huntsman. But we do have a lot of deadly animals. But look, I can't even remember the last time I saw a huntsman.
Yeah. Well, it's a myth.
It is a long trip. It is expensive, but it is a unique experience. And if you are in the barbecue community, there's groups on Facebook. There's the Australian Barbecue Alliance, and there's also another one called Australian Low and Slow. That's got 400,000 members or something like that. So, if people are interested in coming out to Meatstock, whether it's Brazil or Australia, if you jump onto those communities and say you're coming, you'd be surprised how many people will help you with gear if you need to compete, or kind of like help give you ideas of where to go or what to see. Because if you haven't been to Australia yet, it is a beautiful country, and it's something to put on your bucket list at some point. And so is New Zealand as well. New Zealand is beautiful. So if you do maybe get to a New Zealand Meatstock, you could make a road trip out of it, drive the North and the South Island. New Zealand's beautiful as well. And if you did ever get to Australia's Meatstock, again, what I'd suggest is you get in your car and you drive up the coast or down the coast, because it is a beautiful coastline.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the Meatstock that is a hobby, be it probably one of the biggest hobbies, the most popular hobby I've ever seen anybody have, and it still be a hobby, because here we are. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've got friends of mine that have gone to the Meatstock in 23, and got friends that are going in 24. you how do you I'm trying to wrap my brain around how that becomes a hobby, and not something that you're having to work on for like months and months and months and months.
Oh,
Even if you just do two or three,
you
it
do.
just
I do. But I'm the sort of person. I'll work late. I'll get up early. I'll work weekends. I don't. Like my whole theory around work-life balance is a lot of people like to work 8 hours a day and have the weekends and go camping or do whatever. I like to work 3 months straight and then get on a plane to Japan. Um, I just
or India.
or India, right? Just come back from there. So that's kind of always been my thing. Um, I work as hard as I can. I've got a supportive wife, and I just work long hours and again I've got good people around me and good people that are on our crew that look after a lot
Yeah,
of the stuff. So I might look after 20% of it, and someone else is looking after 20%, and someone's looking after 10, and someone's looking after 25%. So all those people come together and they all look after their little areas, and that's kind of what
yeah,
makes it achievable. Otherwise, I think your brain would explode trying to you know do everything at the event and then back it up the week after or a month after.
yeah. But I mean, and I mean, it was kind of it's just blossomed, and you've learned something probably new every year, as you've done it.
Every event you walk away from, you think like there are so many things that can go wrong in an event. Like
Hmm.
you could list them a mile long of things that could go wrong, from bad weather to people hurting themselves, ambulances getting called, you know fights. There's someone getting sick from food. There is hundreds of things that can go wrong. And look, most times we walk away from an event, you always learn something new. You're like, well,
Hmm.
we didn't see that was going to be an issue. We didn't foresee that would be an issue. So now we've got to have some sort of protocol and some sort of policy in place for how to deal with that. So
Yeah.
every time you walk out of an event, you wish you could do it again because you would do it better, but they don't work like
Hmm.
that. Um,
Yeah.
and there's so many things behind the scenes that put pressure on the crew, um, unexpectedly. So sometimes you open that gate and you haven't got your best foot forward, but
Hmm.
everyone's been working their ass off for 3 days to get it ready. But
Yeah.
you learn every time you do an event, you learn, and hopefully people that come to Meatstock see the effort and the energy that we put into it. Um,
Yeah.
and even though I said Meatstock's about $40 to get into, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of people have very high expectations for what they're going to get for $40 USD. Like you can put on some really cool bands and some, big name people. They don't care about that. You could, all the infrastructure that goes into it, the toilets, the venue hire, everything from fireworks to security to
Hmm.
fencing, signage, advertising, all those sorts of things. It all costs a lot of money. And we don't have any government funding. No one's paying the bills. It's the people that
Yeah.
walk through the door and the sponsors that sort of pay for this to happen. So a lot of events in Australia, especially food events, really are government funded. And
Hmm.
but barbecue doesn't really tick the boxes of the people handing out money in the Australian government. So uh, what I'm trying to say is I would hope that for $40 you come through, you spend 4 or 5 hours there, you listen to some cool music, you watch some cool butchers competitions, and you get to walk around the
Hmm.
pit yard, you get to talk to people, and you get to try some barbecue and have a good time. I'd like to think that that's pretty good value for money for a day out.
Yeah. I mean, at $40, I mean, sounds good to me. I mean, I think you probably get away with a few dollars even more even. But don't do that. I haven't gotten. You can do that after I get to come. Um, but do you see Meatstock turning into your full-time job, or you think you always kind of keep it as a hobby, or is it going to be like, when you take retirement one day and then you go, you know what, let's do this even bigger, or is it gonna remain a hobby? Do you think?
Um, I don't know. I suppose we'll see where it takes us all. But at the moment, we're committed to doing the events that we're doing. Um, and yeah, I've got other passions and other interests as well that other businesses as well that I run. So at the moment it works for me, but the right opportunity comes along, I could turn it into a full-time gig. But I'd probably spend a full-time worth of hours on the side anyway. So when I say it's a hobby, I'm probably still doing 40 hours a week outside of my other stuff. So but a few people in barbecue have always said this to me: don't turn your passion into a nightmare by going all in on it. And I think a lot of people are so passionate about barbecue, they go all in. They start a food vending, they start a bricks and mortar, and some people make it work and some people don't. And some people that have been super passionate about barbecue but maybe not so good at business have just not been able to make it work. So I just stay in my lane. We're not interested in starting barbecue restaurants. We're good at doing the events, and that's kind of our focus. So I try not to get sidetracked by too many things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's plenty to be sidetracked though with all the different events and everything else that's part of that. I mean, like you can probably come to a Meatstock and develop a new hobby. You might be at strongman or the arm wrestling or the butcher competition. It's super fascinating. So, so it's not a full-time thing, even though you're working on it full-time thing. How can anybody watching, this is why you get to watch me live, is I lose my train of thought. So you have it as it's a hobby, but you're working on it full time and not necessarily gunning for turning it into a full time thing. And it seems like you're adding something, a small new element on every single one. How do you find a venue to host something like that? And are you hosting it in the same exact location every year, or are you having to move it around? Do you see yourself having to find a new venue if you've been in the same place over and over? Do you see it growing to the point of needing a new venue?
It's an interesting question, that one, because we've mainly stayed in the same venues. We have moved into one new venue in Bendigo. Meatstock is like this. It's a combination of like indoor space and outdoor space. And there's not that many venues in the country which have the indoor and outdoor space that we require. So you can't have a barbecue festival in a convention hall, or a convention center, right? But they're probably the biggest indoor spaces in any state or city in the world, right? So then you've got to find like agricultural grounds is the only way I can put it, like where they've got a kind of a big mix of big indoor areas and then large outdoor areas, because we take up a lot of room. It's not like a concert where you just pack 30,000 people into a little area and then they all kind of disperse. It's a lot spread out because we take up a lot of space with smokers and food vendors and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it's very difficult to find venues because we're a food and beverage festival, and a lot of festivals, a lot of venues, they own the food and beverage for that place. So you go to them and say, cool, this is a great place to do an event. And they're like, well, by the way, as part of the contract, you've got to pay your hire fee, and here's what the hire fee is. And all the money that we make in commission from food and beverage, we take. And then it's like, well, how are we supposed to make this thing viable? How are we supposed to make any money? But that's just the way it is. If it was easy, I suppose everyone would do it. And then the offside is you go find a big park somewhere, and then you've got to put up infrastructure, marquees, fencing, and a big marquee that would fit a couple of 1,000 people might cost $100,000. So look, it's something that we think about all the time, and a lot of people approach us to do an event. They say, hey, we've got this location, it's going to be great for a Meatstock, and we take one look at it and go, that'd be lucky to fit 3,000 people. It's not going to be a Meatstock. So that's the trouble that we have, is we've built Meatstock to a certain scale, and it's not easy finding suitable venues to put Meatstock in it.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice if we could, venues would come to us and they'd be big enough and they'd offer us money to come, and and that does happen in sport. Like in Australia, if you're a sporting event, they're throwing money, states and cities are throwing money at events to say, hey, host the tennis here, host the Formula One here, host your touring cars here. So, but unfortunately, barbecue is not one of those things.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if, because you said around 70,000 people, is that per event or is that in total?
No, it's in total. We'll get about 15,000 people to Auckland or to New Zealand, and then Toowoomba's around about 18,000 people. Bendigo will be around about 15,000 people, and Sydney's about 25,000 people, and then whatever Brazil gets on top of that. So that's just sort of roughly those numbers, and it's a 2-day event. So, and you're talking, if hypothetically there's 10,000 people in the gate, they're there all day because they're eating and drinking. They've come to eat. It's a barbecue festival. The food vendors will go through 20,000 meals a day.
Yeah.
And I suppose that happens at a lot of other events around the place, but it's not an easy undertaking to cook that many portions of barbecue.
No, that's I'm just sitting here thinking, because I've catered larger events and worked larger events as as a vendor on vendor row, and I mean, how do you plan for something like that? Somebody that's going to spend 2 days with you, or even somebody that's going to spend an entire day, and going to come to your neighbor and eat lunch, and then come to you and eat dinner. How do you come up with the numbers to satisfy that number of people and keep it the quality up, of course.
Yeah, look, it's something that keeps me up at night thinking about that sort of stuff, because if you've ever catered before and catering is your business, like being a barbecue, you don't have a bricks and mortar, you travel around with your smokers and portable setup and you do events. It's a very, very risky business. There's highs and lows. Weather is a big one, but then you also run into promoters that tell you that 30,000 people are going to show up and they don't. Or they tell you that,
that's never happened.
No, and other stories are like, the promoter doesn't tell you that ticket sales are down, but still gets the same amount of food vendors. So everyone prepares, and then all of a sudden, no one does well. So there are risks to being a caterer, but what we try to do is we try to be as open and honest with them about how many people that we expect to come through the doors. And a lot of the experience that we've had with events that haven't gone well is because the promoter doesn't know how many people are going to turn up, and he's just, it's a wing and a prayer type thing. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So what we try and do is we try and be as open as honest about where our ticket sales are at, where we think that we're going to get to based on our experience, and how many portions we think they might do based on how many people that are going there. Because what we've found is everyone's aware of the risk, but if you can mitigate it a little bit, like if someone knows they don't have to prepare as much, great. But what no one wants to see at the end of the day is a big cool room full of meat, or holding ovens full of meat that you thought you would sell and they haven't sold. So not only did you waste your time, but you also wasted a heap of meat. So if we can sort of mitigate that by saying, hey, don't cook as much or cook more, then that kind of prepares everybody. But, unfortunately, the one thing Australians really haven't got used to yet is there's queues. Because it's low and slow barbecue, it's not fast food, right? And I think the mistake that a lot of people make, and I think this happens in the States a lot, is in order to move the crowd as quick as you possibly can, you start to skimp on quality, and you start to put things in a box that you probably wouldn't serve to your family and friends, because you've got to get that line going, right? And you've got 3 hours and the line's a mile long. We're kind of lucky that the food people that we do have are still really quality orientated. And if the lines are long, they're just long. That's just the way it is. We very rarely, put it this way, right? People complain about the queues, but they very rarely, if ever, complain about the quality of the food.
Yeah.
So that's one
It's
thing. I'd rather have people complain about the lines than the food.
100%. I mean, the first time that you're getting complaints about the food, you're going, maybe they don't get the invite next year.
Yeah, and look, and people's psychology is very, very weird, right? And I've tried to understand it, but I've given up on it. People line up at the longest line because they feel like that's the best barbecue. They don't know anything about barbecue. They got the longest line. Must be for a reason. I'll go line up there. And sometimes, like, I plead with people at the back of the line. I'm like, this lineup is 45 minutes long. That's how long it's going to take you to get to the front. That guy's got, 20-minute lineup, 10-minute lineup, just as good, I promise you. But they're like, nah, I'm staying right here. This must be the best. So that's just human psychology. But then they'll complain about lining up in the 45-minute line. But that's just the way it goes.
Yeah. Yes, that's just part of it. But I mean, like, you've got barbecue restaurants here that, line up. You've got Franklin's and the Burnt Bean Co. down in Seguin and all these different places that people are lined just up the block. And I mean, there's a reason that there's a reason in most cases for them to have that line, or they're just really slow. One of the two.
I think there's some smart vendors out there that have realized that if you get your quality right and you've got an amazing product, which Franklin and Burt Bean obviously do. Ernest is champion. I should be wearing his hat, but I think that there's a combination of those two things happening: amazing food, and let's just control how many portions we get out, because it creates like a hype and an interest, and then people start lining up earlier and earlier, and I think there's a combination of those two things happening where you don't over cater, you cater to a level, you don't skimp on your quality, and that's what those places do really well. They're not trying to move 10,000 people through the door or 5,000 people. They're just trying to serve barbecue to whatever it is, 400 of the people that decided to line up and come to get barbecue. And we're not going to sacrifice on quality. We're going to make it the best barbecue ever, but we're only doing it for 400 people. And that's why people start to line up early. And in our world, we call it lines create lines. So if you're a food vendor without a line, you might not get a line because people are lining up at the other lines thinking it's better barbecue. So those places have both of those things going on: good quality, limit what they do, and the hype with the lines is just what happens as a result of that.
Yeah. So you're putting on these massive events. You can't have the same bands necessarily every year, but you can have the same vendors and some of the same probably master classes and stuff like that. Do you have a master list that you have vendors that are at every single event that you've got every single year, or is it new vendors every year?
When we first did Meatstock, man, I was scratching around for anyone who could do barbecue, and there wasn't that many. And the ones that we had, some, we're like, oh, fried chicken, that's sort of like meaty, like we'll put them in, because we just didn't have the low and slow culture. There wasn't people cooking low and slow. So as time's gone on, we have about 16 or 17 bigger scale caterers that come to Meatstock that do really good barbecue. And there's probably 50 people on our waiting list. Who would like to come in, but you get to know people, you form a relationship. They don't let you down. They don't run out of food. They're serving really good barbecue at a really reasonable price, and they're good at it. They're good at what they do. And like I said, I hardly ever hear anyone complain about the quality of the food at Meatstock, right? Because people are getting good barbecue. So just by default, we tend to work with the same sort of people all the time. But you'll see some people leave and drop out. There's probably 30% of them are different every year, where new vendors will come on and someone might drop off. But yeah, it's mainly like the same sort of people, and those people sometimes tour with us. They'll go, right, I'm doing some people will say, all I can do is Queensland. It's too far to get to Melbourne. And then they do Queensland. They're like, bugger it. That was too much fun. Let's get in the car for 2 days to 3 days and drive to Melbourne. So a bit of both. Bit of some vendors that are local for that particular region, a few new ones, and then a couple of like what I call, the best of the best that do this stuff religiously and do it really well. And we've got a lot of that people keep coming back. So, and I'd like to think, like, put it this way: when we first did Meatstock and we put a smoker out there, people would stand around and go, "Wow, look at this smoker! It's amazing," And then the next year, someone would come with a bigger trailer pit, and then it'd be a bigger one, and the next thing you know, they're on the back of trucks, and people are forking off their smokers, and they're huge. And a lot of what we do now at the moment is a combination of that and live fire cooking. So there's a lot of live fire cooking at Meatstock. You get a lot of theatre. You get to watch what people are doing, because barbecue's great and all, but at the end of the day, close the lid on a smoker, and what do you got to watch? Nothing, right? So a lot of our vendors will cook low and slow because that's what people want to eat. But over here, they're cooking a crocodile over a live fire pit, and over there, it's got 100 hanging tomahawks over a pit, and over here is a carousel of pigs going around in circles. So there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot of variation of barbecue, is what I'd say. But it all is kind of based around the principle of, at the very least, cooking over charcoal. So you get that smoky flavor, or cooking over wood. And then mainly most of it is what I call low and slow. It's cooked lower temperatures for a longer amount of time. So, And a lot of that style of cooking got popular in Brazil. So there's an event in Brazil called Truscada. If you haven't been, it's my number one pick for festivals to go around the world. Meatstock, at one stage, we did a top 10 barbecue festivals in the world, and we picked Truscada to be number one. That's a cool event. It's all open fire cooking. It's a really cool event if you happen to get to it. But it's a mixture of both. People cooking out of smokers and people that are also doing live fire cooking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's especially with everything else you guys have got going on. There's something to be said watching the fire, coming up and licking the meats and just watching that process. It's a show for sure. So you started Meatstock. If you could start over, if Meatstock wasn't a thing, and you said, you know what, I'm going to start doing something like a Meatstock, what advice would you give yourself for starting an event like Meatstock?
Give yourself a year. Give yourself time to organize it. A lot of people, what they do is they have a great idea and they go, cool, let's do it in 2 months' time. And they just don't realize how long it takes to organize these things. So start a long way out, because we're lucky. We're built from a small venue, and every time you do a report about, crowd movements, or you do a report about fire safety, these are things that we're banking for every single show. Whereas if you're doing a show from scratch, these are all things that you all have to do at once. So, I would just say, give yourself time, give yourself a year, give yourself 6 months. And then the other part is, how do you sell the dream to other people? How do you have to figure out, do you have a big enough following, or do you know people with a big enough following that can help you get a crowd to there? So 2 things. I think a lot of people set it up and they just expect that people would come because they just think, put tickets on sale and people come. But it's not that easy. You've really got to have a following. You've got to market yourself. You've got to spend money on marketing. And the other thing is, you see people get short. They just get short on time. They rock up to an event as a promoter, and you can tell they're flustered. They're behind the 8 ball, and you end up sort of trying to spot fires. You're putting out spot fires. But at a Meatstock, what we hope to do is all those spot fires we deal with before we open the gates. And then once we open the gates, it's just the festival running, right? But you're not running around like an idiot trying to, organize things at the last minute. And don't get me wrong, I do things at the last minute all the time, and I try and be organised, but I just think that people underestimate the amount of work that it goes into feeding not only thousands of people, but also entertaining them, making sure the bar lineups are short, making sure that people get wristbanded. How's the ticketing process work when people go through? What's the experience like? Where do they sit? Where do they go to the toilet? How far are those toilets away? What's the security like? What's your policy when someone has too much hot sauce and they can't breathe? Like there's so many of these things that you don't really think are going to be an issue, but will become an issue. And if you give yourself time, you will figure it out. But if you don't, then it's hard to get out of the weeds when you're already in them.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So, where can everybody find information about Meatstock?
You can go to meatstock.com.au. That's where we put up all the things for all of our shows that we've got. So meatstock.com.au is the Australian kind of like website. But you can also find us on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Each of the events has its own Facebook page. I think Sydney Meatstock's probably the most popular one. And we do flutter with like TikTok and YouTube, but it's hard to be like a social media influencer and run a festival at the same time, right? So we pick and choose. We just try and do a really good job of our events, and then hopefully people understand, or hopefully people see what we do and appreciate it. But we don't dedicate as much time as we should to kind of like giving love to our social media followers. That's for sure.
Well, I would venture to say that if you're going, especially if you're coming from here, going there, from the States to Australia, I would imagine the amount of photos that we would be taking and posting would probably be a good head start on helping the social media woes of a Meatstock. And I can't imagine there's too many woes from the social side of that.
Yeah, we had a lot of Americans come out in 2020 with the SCA, with the State Cook-Off Association, ready to compete and cook, and that was the year that COVID shut everything down. So unfortunately, they had a pretty shitty experience, which no one could help, of course. But anyone is welcome to Meatstock. If you want to find your way down here, let us know. We'll put you in touch with people in the group that can help make your trip that much easier by lending you gear or borrowing stuff or showing you where to buy meat or any of that sort of stuff. So there's plenty of people prepared to help. And if you do come down just to experience it, there are certain things that I would call a barbecue bucket list. And, doing a road trip through Austin, Texas is one of them, right? You want to go to Snows and you want to go to Louis Mueller's and all the rest of it. But then there are some events like Meatstock, like Truscata. There's another one called the Big Grill in Ireland, which I really want to get to, which I haven't been there yet. There's one called Smoke and Fire in the UK that's hosting the World Butcher Wars. There's one called Meatopia in London. These are kind of events that I think that if you love barbecue and you love travel, which is two things that I love, then you should put those things on your barbecue bucket list.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll kindly table it. From here. I definitely want to be able to sit down with you because I feel like just picking your brain. I may spend 3 hours doing that. I don't want to take your entire day. I know it's still relatively early in the day for you, but we'll kind of table it from here. Guys on Facebook, YouTube that's watching, thank you guys for watching. We'll hit the outro, and I've got a couple of quick questions, and then I'll let you go. So as far as this is got to let you kind of think on this while I'm doing my little quick outro. I'm doing a virtual cookbook, if you will. I want a dish that has got to be on your table for the holidays, whichever holiday. I mean, you pick Easter or Christmas, Hanukkah, whichever holiday you would like. But think of me a quick recipe, and I don't tell anybody ahead of time because I want it to go the first thing you think about is, grandma's stuffing or grandma's, or grandpa's such and such that he makes every year or used to make every year, um, and the story behind it. All right, that'll put this week's episode of the Smoke Ring Syndicate in the books. Shout out to our guest this week from Meatstock in Australia, Jay Beaumont. Jay, I appreciate your time. I've got to get down, and probably going to end up seeing you in Brazil one year soon. Appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, hit me with your recipe.
Okay, so Australia has obviously we have a very proud Indigenous past, but it's a lot of English colonization that's happened in Australia, and I guess what they do and what a lot of Australians do is what they call like a Sunday dinner, and it's a Sunday roast. I don't know if they do it in America. Maybe it's Thanksgiving type thing, but it's kind of like mashed potatoes, like mushy peas, lamb generally. And it's like it's a Sunday roast. So what I like to do is I like to cook a lamb shoulder in the smoker, and you get a good lamb rub with some earthy kind of like elements to that rub. And I get a tortilla. I put the pulled lamb on top, like you put pulled pork. I put some mushy peas through it. I put some hot chips instead of like baked potatoes. And then I put some gravy on it, and I've done a video on it before, but that's a combination of a couple of different cuisines there. But that's one of those dishes that's uniquely, I don't know, something that we kind of just sort of invented in the house, and it's something that we have quite regularly.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a family recipe. It's something that you guys have kind of created for yourselves that a couple of generations from now will go, oh, I remember when Uncle Jay started making these crazy tacos.
Yeah, well, my mum does. Sorry, my dad doesn't cook, and my mum's a vegetarian, so I have there's no foodie history in our family, put it that way. So, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've cooked everything and anything, like I've gone through cookbooks from pit masters and different chefs and whatnot, and I love cooking. But I do love, if you haven't yet, and you get your hands on a lamb shoulder, and you do like lamb because it's a bit of a different taste, but lamb shoulder cooks just like a pork butt. Yeah, that's pretty money for me.
That's that's really crazy that you've got two parents that are, not that vegetarians can't cook, but like vegetarian doesn't do meat stock, and dad doesn't necessarily cook, but here you are putting on a massive barbecue contest. It's kind of entertaining.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love to cook, but I'm not good at it, right? That's the thing. I'm just not good at it. Like, I've got to follow a recipe to a T. It's got to be in a book. I've got to step 1, step 2, step 3, and that's the way I cook. Other people just have natural flair. They throw things together, and they know what they kind of need to do, and they know what they need, it should look like. But I don't have that flair. So, but I love to eat. I love to eat. So it's far easier for me to fulfill my passion of barbecue, to get other people to come and cook, and I'll organize the thing, than it is for me to cook and they organize it.
There you go. I really thought that you would have come from like a culinary background, like your parents were in the culinary world, and it just was kind of like the next culinary step is barbecue. So it's kind of interesting.
I wish I was like Tuffy Stone and I had that sort of story that, I went from culinary and then I went into barbecue and all that, but I just don't, I don't. And I didn't fall in love with food until I was like 28, 26 years old. I remember going to a friend's house and they had this kind of like a dip and it had this green stuff on top, and I ate it and I'm like, wow, what is that? I couldn't believe it. And she goes, oh, that's coriander. So that shows you, or you call it cilantro in America, right?
Yeah.
But that shows you the level of understanding of food that I had late, nearly into my 30s. I didn't have anything to do with food. but this barbecue thing has grabbed me. And as soon as I got involved in barbecue, then part of it is not just barbecue. It's kind of learning how to cook, right? It's kind of learning a lot of the things you learn about barbecue translate into other things. And then all of a sudden you got to cook sides and you got to put a salad on. And next thing you know, you're buying a pizza oven and starting to cook pizzas. And so, you know, barbecue was kind of like the vessel that got me into food in general. And, you know, there's only so many times you can cook a brisket or beef ribs or whatever. Then you just start exploring with other types of, you know, next thing you know, you're doing beef shins, or you're doing tomahawk steaks, or you're making a chimichurri because you know, heard about this new type of thing. So we're so lucky these days that we've got the internet and TikTok and YouTube and whatever else, that if you want to know how to cook something, you can find out real quick, and you can go to the supermarket. Like, what a crazy part of time that we live in. Like 100 years, 50 years ago, it wasn't even really possible that you could sit there, watch someone on TikTok, and that your supermarket is well stocked up enough that you can go there, buy whatever you need to make that recipe and have it cooked that night. Like, I think we take that for granted, that we just have access to all that stuff. But if you want to get into barbecue now, there is just so many places that you can go learn. There's so many places to cut down, because there's a lot to learn. There's what types of woods do I wrap? Do I not wrap? Is it butcher's paper? Is it foil? How do I know if this cut's any good? Like, there's so many questions about barbecue, but I feel like now there's all the answers out there. You just got to want to go find them.
Oh yeah, well, and there's 3 answers to every question with barbecue too.
That's what makes it interesting. It sure does, because for every person that says wrap, there's someone that says doesn't wrap, and then they're going to argue about what to wrap with, and that's before you even get to woods and water pans and God knows what else.
Yeah. Well, or binder versus no binder.
Right.
I'm staunchly against any kind of binder. Mustard goes on hot dogs or hamburgers, or you know, maybe in a chili dog, but it has no place as a binder in my barbecue. In my barbecue. You know,
the good part about that is exploring what people's ideas are, and then you put them to the test yourself, and you learn what you like and don't like. Or so, you know, for example, I wouldn't wrap beef ribs ever. If I do a brisket, I wrap it in foil, but a lot of people will say butcher's paper. I use a binder, but I usually use olive oil or peanut oil, and I use hardly nothing. You know, pre-bought rubs, store-bought rubs, I probably use a lot of them now because I just can't be asked making my own rubs, because the ones you can buy are bloody great. So look, there's a lot of personal preferences to barbecue, but at the end of the day, if you're in there doing it and you like it and you feel like you've done a good job, then that's all the power to you. You know, like I just hate the way that the internet has become this judging platform, that people can see a picture of something or a video of something and turn around and go, oh, well, you know, you didn't buy a good enough brisket, or you're not going to be able to use that wood. You know, people are on their own sort of journey learning about barbecue, and everyone started somewhere, right? So
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Man, I'm digging your signs behind you, man. Was that Meat Lab?
What have I got here? During COVID we got a bit bored, and I set up a little studio to do some recipe videos, and we did a few, but then it's like, well, what do I want to be? Do I want to be an influencer, or do I want to be a barbecue festival? And so we don't use it as much as we should. We do some videos in here, but you know, that's really when you get to the point that I'd have to make barbecue my job, when I start, you know, trying to be an influencer.
Yeah, for sure. So anything that we didn't touch on with Meatstock that you might like to have included, or that I can clip out?
No, I think, look, all I could say is everyone's welcome. We feel like we do a pretty cool festival. And if you are a promoter, or you do have some history in events and you'd like to do a Meatstock somewhere else, then get in contact with us, because we feel like we've got a really good format, and we feel like what we do is really unique, and there's a lot of little quirks to what we do that I think would translate anywhere in the world. So
Hmm.
yeah, just get in touch with us if you'd like to see a Meatstock in your local area or your town or city or country, and yeah, that would go a long way to sort of helping us get the brand and the name out there, because I'd love to be in a position one day where we say we've got 10 Meatstocks around the world. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Um, but I mean, there's still merit to it, to just keeping it Australian too. It's kind of like a the holy Mecca kind of thing, like with they do the Memphis in May in America, and it's like the World Series of barbecue, but they're not doing that anywhere else other than that one place.
Yeah,
So
did you,
you could always go that way too. Yeah.
yeah, bloody. I went to Memphis in May for the first time this year, and I really liked it. You know, it's a shame to see what's happening there.
Absolutely can't hear anything. Try
Yeah,
that again.
I went to Memphis in May for the first time last year and had a great time. I thought it was a great event, but it's a shame to see what's happening with that event and the new event. And
Yeah.
it's just, hopefully they both survive and do well, because that event is one of those iconic things like the Jack and like the Royal that anyone who's in barbecue aspires to go to. You know, Memphis in May, I'm going to go the Royal, I'm going to go the Jack, and they're those inspirational events that transcend the other 400 barbecue competitions that happen.
Yeah.
And so it'd be a shame to see that we lose one or it doesn't do as well as it should, because there's this competition between two different promoters. But yeah, I did go there for the first time last year, and I really did love it. I thought it was a great vibe and a great atmosphere. And what I liked about it is, you know, as a punter, it's probably not the best event because you really got to know a team and be in with a team. But the format was unique. It's different. It doesn't happen anywhere else. Live on-site judging, it just happens at Memphis in May like that. And it's, I think that's what makes that event so special, is it's different. And I think that should be encouraged in barbecue. I think we've got ourselves pigeonholed into this. It just has to be the 4 different cuts of meat, and we put them all in this little box, and that's what we do, and that's competition barbecue. But in the UK, they're trying a system called freestyle barbecue, and you see what Memphis in May do. A twist to it is a good thing, and I think it keeps it interesting for pitmasters as well. I think if you're a real pitmaster, then doing something different is and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is something that it should be, you should aspire to, basically.
No, absolutely. And the Memphis Barbecue Network used to have on site for preliminary and finals, but now they only do it for finals. But the other hurdle with that is doing the on site is with with ribs themselves. If you got 3 judges, you got 3 extra slabs of ribs that you got to cook. So I mean it's a little give and take, but I think all the evolutions that are coming with the freestyle barbecue, because I actually spoke to one of the gentlemen that is near. It's not necessarily the guy that's doing the freestyle, but he's near that area that's talking about the freestyle barbecue competition. So he's actually on my list for next month to sit down and chat with. I'm hoping to get him and somebody that's a little bit closer to the whole freestyling idea. But we'll see.
Yeah, well, you never know. I think, look at SCA. Look how much that organisation has grown, and people are doing. You look at the Shed doing their competition the other day, and what are they doing? They're doing Bloody Marys. That's a hand in. It's wild. And I think that puts a lot of fun into it. And they've got, they sort of treat the auxiliaries pretty highly, right? So it's not just like steak is all that matters. People are still into all those side dishes that people are cooking, and they really get into it. And I think there's a lot of fun there. And just to see how quickly that organisation has grown, how big their world championships is becoming, and how addicted people are in Australia and abroad to chasing the leaderboards. And I see all my friends, and they're all running around cooking these little steaks. But it just goes to show that we can be a bit more adventurous with how we pigeonhole barbecue.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. All right, man. Well, I'm gonna get off of here. Otherwise, I'll sit up all night and just talking barbecue and just random. We'll be off in some far off place. Um, I have an idea for a meat stock spot though. I want to talk to the guy before I start talking, through that. But he's got a really awesome place that I think would be. Um, think Mike could hold a meat stock location.
Happy to
Well,
look at
I'll be in touch.
All right. Good to hear.
All right, buddy. Thanks for your time, man.
All right. Catch ya. Thanks for everything.
Yes. See you, buddy.